Every Sunday, Pastor Emmanuel filled the church with his powerful words. He preached about honesty, love, and God's blessings. People came from far and wide to hear him speak. They believed every word he said, even when he began asking for more and more offerings. He said God needed their money. He said their blessings were tied to how much they gave. Some people didn't have much to give, but they trusted him. After all, he was the pastor. He wouldn't lie, would he? But behind closed doors, Pastor Emmanuel's life was full of secrets. The money meant for the church was being spent on himself. He bought expensive clothes, fine food, and even a new car. His congregation struggled while he lived in luxury. But that wasn't all. Pastor Emmanuel had a darker side, one that only his family and a few in the village saw. At home, he was a different man. His wife, Ada, was often at the receiving end of his anger. He would lash out at her for the smallest reasons. One night, after a church service, Pastor Emmanuel came home in a bad mood. He had heard rumors that someone in the village was questioning how he spent the church's money. His face was twisted in fury. Who dares speak against me? Do they know who I am? I am a chosen man of God, he muttered. Angrily, he paced around the house. Ada, who had been quietly preparing dinner, tried to calm him down. Maybe it's just gossip, my husband. People talk. Don't let it upset you, she said softly. But her words only made him angrier. He stormed over to her, his eyes wild. Gossip? Is that what you think? Are you trying to say I am wrong? Before she could answer, he slapped her hard across the face. That why? Ada stumbled back, tears filling her eyes, but she didn't cry out. She had learned not to. Over the years, Pastor Emmanuel's temper had gotten worse, and she had become accustomed to this violence. She prayed for strength, but the man who stood before her seemed far from the man of God she once believed him to be. Unknown to them, their son, Chidi, just 7 years old, had been watching from the doorway. His heart raced as he saw his father strike his mother. He had always known his father had a temper, but this was something else. He didn't understand why someone who spoke of the love and peace in church could be so cruel at home. That night, Chidi couldn't sleep. His father's words echoed in his mind, but so did his mother's silent tears. As if beating his wife wasn't enough, Pastor Emmanuel had another shameful secret. He had begun taking advantage of young girls in the village, using his position as a pastor to lure them in. He would tell them that they were special, that God had chosen them for a holy purpose, and all of that. But the truth was far from holy. He manipulated these girls, promising blessings and favor in exchange for their silence. Many were too afraid to speak out, fearing no one would believe them over the respected pastor. One of the girls was named Amara, a beautiful and innocent 16-year-old who had grown up in the church. Pastor Emmanuel had approached her after a service one evening, offering to mentor her in faith. At first, she was excited, but soon his mentorship turned into something fishy. He began making advances, pressuring her into private meetings where he took advantage of her and other shameful acts. Amara was ashamed, scared, and confused. She didn't know who to turn to. The villagers, blinded by his charm and authority, had no idea what was happening. They continued to revere him, praising his name every Sunday. But not everyone was fooled. Amara's mother had noticed the change in her daughter, how withdrawn she had become, and Chidi, wise beyond his years, had started to piece things together. One evening, something strange happened in the village. A woman known as Nkechi began acting in ways no one could explain. She would scream and wail in the streets, her eyes wild and her body contouring in unnatural ways. Word spread quickly that Nkechi had been possessed by a dark spirit. The villagers, terrified, called upon Pastor Emmanuel to deliver her. After all, he was the chosen man of God, the one who would cast out demons. Pastor Emmanuel saw this as an opportunity to reinforce his position of power. If he could heal Nkechi, it would prove once again that he was the chosen one. When he arrived, the entire village had gathered to watch. Nkechi was being held down by two strong men, her face twisted in rage, and she spat curses at those around her. Pastor Emmanuel stood tall, his Bible clutched in his hands. "In the name of Jesus, I command you to leave this woman," he shouted, his voice booming. But the spirit within Nkechi only laughed, a cold, chilling sound. "You?" It snared through her lips. "Who are you to command me?" Pastor Emmanuel's confidence faltered for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. "I am the chosen man of God," he declared, his voice trembling slightly. "I have the power of the Almighty behind me." The possessed woman's body convulsed as the spirit spoke again. "Chosen? You are a liar. You steal, you abuse, you are no man of God." The crowd gasped, whispers spreading like wildfire. Pastor Emmanuel's face went pale, but he refused to back down. I am a chosen. Who are you? Who are you?" he repeated, his voice desperate now. "Leave this woman, I command you." But the spirit wasn't finished. "You are a chosen for punishment." Nkechi's voice hissed, "Your time has come." At that moment, Nkechi's body fell limp, the spirit seemingly gone, but the damage had been done. The villagers stood in stunned silence, eyes filled on Pastor Emmanuel. For the first time, doubts began to creep into their minds. Could the spirit's words be true? Pastor Emmanuel quickly tried to brush it off, telling the villagers that the spirit had been trying to deceive them. But the seed of doubts had been planted already. One day, Chidi overheard a conversation between his father and one of the church elders. The elder, an older man named Uncle Chidi, was a kind soul who genuinely cared for the church and its people. He had been asking questions lately, wondering where all the money from the offerings were going. Pastor Emmanuel, sensing the threat, tried to cover his track. "Uncle Chidi, the money is being used for important church projects." Pastor Emmanuel lied smoothly. "We are working on expanding our ministry, and soon you will see the results." But Uncle Chidi wasn't convinced. "I've been hearing rumors, Pastor. People are starting to talk. Some say you've been using our offerings for your personal gain. Is that true?" Pastor Emmanuel's face darkened. "Are you accusing me of stealing from God's house?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "No, Pastor, I'm just concerned. The people trust you, but trust is a fragile thing." Chidi, hiding behind the door, held his breath. He knew his father was lying. He had seen too much, but what could a 7-year-old boy do? That night, as Pastor Emmanuel slept, Chidi crept into his parents' room and found a key to his father's private office. He had seen where his father kept the money, and he needed proof. Quietly, he unlocked the office door and stepped inside. His heart pounded as he searched through the drawers. Then he found it, a hidden box filled with cash, far more than the church could ever receive in offering. There were also expensive watches, jewelry, and even documents showing large transactions made in his father's name. Chidi's hand shook as he realized the full extent of his father's deceit. He couldn't stay silent any longer. The next Sunday, as the church gathered for service, Pastor Emmanuel stood before the congregation, smiling as always. He began his sermon, speaking about faith and trust, encouraging people to give generously. But before he could finish, a small voice interrupted him. It was Chidi. "Dad, you say we should trust you, but you've been lying to everyone," Chidi said, standing up in front of the whole church. Everyone was shocked. So many surprises written over the congregation faces. Pastor Emmanuel's face went pale. He tried to wave it off, but Chidi continued, his voice trembling but firm. "I've seen what you've done. You take the church's money and you keep it for yourself, and you hurt Mom. You are not the man you say you are." The church fell into a shocked silence. Pastor Emmanuel's hand clenched the pulpit as he glared at his son. "Chidi, sit down there now," he commanded, his voice shaking with rage. But Chidi didn't sit. Instead, he pulled out the document he had found in his father's office and handed them to Uncle Chidi, who was sitting in the front row. The elder's eyes widened as he looked through the paper. This is a proof," Uncle Chidi said, his voice barely a whisper. "Pastor, how could you?" The congregation erupted in whispers. Their trust in their pastors shattered. People began to stand, anger and betrayal clear on their faces. Mothers clutched their children and fathers shook their heads in disbelief. But Chidi wasn't finished. "And it's not just the money. Dad has been hurting people. He beat my mom and he had done terrible things to the girls in the village." At this point, Amara stood up, tears streaming down her face. "It's true. Pastor Emmanuel, he took advantage of me," she sobbed. The church was in chaos now. The truth was out, and there was no going back. Pastor Emmanuel, realizing his world was crumbling, tried to make a run for it, but the villagers blocked his way. Their once blind faith now replaced with anger and disgust. The police were called and Pastor Emmanuel was arrested. His empire of lies had finally come down crashing. And that is the end of our story. What would you do if you found out someone you trusted so deeply was not who they claimed to be? Would you speak out like Chidi did, or would you stay silent out of fear? In the end, Pastor Emmanuel's deceit didn't just hurt his family, it hurt the entire community. But it was a brave boy's voice, the voice of truth, that saved them all from further pain. This story reminds us that the truth, no matter how hidden, will always find a way to come out. It teaches us that when we see something wrong, even if we are afraid, we must speak up. We never know how much good can come from telling the truth, even when it's hard. So guys, what do you think of this story? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to stand up for the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Remember, we all have a voice, and sometimes it's the smallest voices that make the biggest difference. Till I come your way next time, have an amazing time. Take care.